Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Happy almost holidays to you all. Happy almost Thanksgiving to you all. Today we have another special guest. Last time we had Mr. Hogg, who joined us for the news program. This time we have a holiday special with Mr. Ruff, who's joining us today in our discussion about climate matters. And as you can see, climate matters is always a very important topic when it comes to about our environment and world, especially when we live in that world that involves about our climate. As of late, the weather has been pretty cold. A lot of rain, cyclones, tornadoes going off on the East Coast. Here on the West Coast in Northern California, we've been seeing a lot of rain. So climate and the environment definitely matters as it affects how we do certain things, affects our mood, and also affects how we live our lives. So today I wanted to talk to Mr. Ruff and again with our special guest, Mr. Hogg, on how climate affects them and how certain environments talks affects them in different ways. So, my name is Mr. Hedge, and I welcome you to the holiday special. So, Mr. Ruff, please introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Mr. Ruff. Um, I just recently moved over here from SoCal into Northern California, and I appreciate you having me on this show. I watched your previous news segment with Mr. Hogg, and I thought it was really funny, especially with that football. Mr. Hogg, I just quickly before we start, what happened to your football? Oh, well, as I always say, my football is one of my prized possessions, but sometimes you gotta let things go. You forgot it, didn't you? Yes, I did. But that's beside the point. Today we're talking about climate matters. So let's get to it. Yes, of course. So, in regards to your question, Mr. Hedge, to me, climate is something a very important thing that definitely needs to be talked about. As we know, when it comes to our environment, it affects the things we do and how we live. Throughout the course of history, we have seen an increase of temperatures rising and winters being colder. As we can see even now, as of late, when it comes even into October, it's still very hot. But when it's November as of now, it's been a lot of rainy, a lot of cold. And we've been noticing these patterns been increasing in the past few years. And we know that such topics definitely need to be talked about, especially in a high school, middle school, or even elementary curriculum. Yet I noticed that not many are the focus, because when I was growing up as a pup, we never learned about any of these climate topics. And I've seen that not too much emphasis is put upon it. I can see how definitely with the narratives, when we don't talk about it, definitely control who has in power and how these rules and status society are maintained through those narratives. And when these narratives, especially when it comes to climate matters, do not really be touched upon, I can see how many people don't really know about the environment and how it's really affecting them. Just this past year, when I was in the summer, my little paws got burned because of the hot pavement. It was usually hotter than usual because whenever I go outside every summer, I'll enjoy my walks. But now, as of late, the temperature has been increasing and increasing every year, and I noticed that it's been getting hotter and hotter. As a result, I've been tending to stay less inside and using my air conditioning, but the electric bill goes up through the roof. As a result, I've been noticing how the temperatures have been really fluctuating, and depending on what day it is, affects what I do. How about you, Mr. Hogg? Well, for me, as you know, I like to eat, I like to play football, and I love to go outside. But as of late, especially these cold winters, even though I have fur, it's still pretty cold for me. And like you said, especially when we were going to school, and I know Mr. Hedge could vouch for that we don't really have much topics coming to climate. I remember back when I was learning the science class, we talked a little bit about the weather, but not much about the everlasting impacts about climate change, environmental justice, and any other topics. I see that it is very important, especially since I live in the outside and I play a sport that is outside, affects our day to day lives. And I always notice that these things have always existed, but for some reason, they're never talked about in school. This is especially highlighted when I was reading, again, my favorite book. What was it called? Teaching When the World is on Fire by Lisa Elpett. One of the articles that really stood out to me was with the Amian Harmon text, in which she was mentioning how one of her students was not believing in climate change, even though there's many science and facts backing up how the weather has dramatically changed, especially with the human involvement. But she felt like it was an attack on her beliefs. And even though the teacher was trying to show her like these things are really important and matter, there's some students, and I'm pretty sure even some of my colleagues when I went to school, who do not agree that these climate topics are worth talking about or even exist. Even though, as you said, uh, when you were going on your daily walks, that it'll be very hot for me too. As you know, I have this fur to help me protect me from the cold, but when it gets very hot, I start shedding a lot, and it's really hard for us to survive. That's why I have to dig in my holes in order to stay cool. It causing me to stay in longer where I usually would love to go out during the summer, but as a result, these higher and higher temperatures are ever going to be increasing. And it's a shame to know that, especially when it comes to the educational field, when we don't talk about these things, that we're telling students that these things don't matter because it's not worth talking about or having discussion over. And I know in regards to many people who do talk about it, they see the importance of the climate. They see how if we don't make any changes, that the world we live in is eventually going to end. And especially since we are the ones who live on it and this is our only home, we will have no home to call a home. As a result, I feel it really important to have these kind of conversations, have these topics. Even though some people think that's misinformation, it does not exist. And even at one point we had like our president who uh, did not think that such a thing existed despite the ever-changing weather and over the past 50 years. It's really important to have these kind of topics and conversations, especially at an educational level, because they are going to be the ones who are the ones going to be bearing the burden of all the stuff that we have done in the past. And so I especially feel like by going again on this segment, I feel like it's very important to have these topics and conversations. Thank you, Mr. Hogg, for also sharing about your response on how you feel the climate matters. And as I'm pretty sure, as most of us agree that, and especially if you've seen the news, the weather has been dramatically changing over the past course years. A lot of unprecedented events. Glaciers have been melting. Environments have been ruining. Species have been becoming more endangered as a result of the weather effects. And no doubt, as it continues, no one will have any planet to live. Eventually, who knows, in the next 10, 20 years, we'll have to rely on, oxygen masks in order to be able to breathe and thrive in this air. So I definitely agree when it comes to you two that these topics should definitely be talked about. And so I was wondering, upon the completion of the reading, was you challenged or motivated by any of the readings that you guys read based on that chapter of Climate Matters? Mr. Paws? Well, for me, I definitely see it really sit with me when it came to the climate science meets a stubborn obstacle to students. It really stood out to me when it said that the teacher who was there left a high-paying job, and while the job that they were working at was related to climate, they rather decided to use their wisdom to help teach that to other students, to the next generation. And it really stood out to me where it says, I left the high-barrier job to come and teach an area like this. We're like, what is that supposed to mean? That means that he saw the importance of the money is not really important, but the education of helping students become aware about these events and we're talking about. And I've also noticed based on the other reading where it says Teachers versus Climates by Bill Bigelow, how it really motivated to me to actually push for a curriculum and, topics to have conversation with in schools where we talk more about climate change and environmental justice and, the effects of what we do on this planet and, how it leaves long-term effects. Because like Mr. Hogg was saying, we live on this planet. If no one takes care of it, who will? Just like if no one takes care of our bodies, if we don't take care of our bodies, no one will take care of it. So I feel like it's really important to push and fight for environmental change. And not in a way where different races have different opinions on how it should be cared, but we should all come together and share our wisdom and share our understanding and take care of this planet. And, establish communities and support for how important it is to make a planet worth living for instead of trying to kill it off and make money. Mr. Hogg? I definitely agree. I agree with you, Mr. Paws. It really motivated me to be more supportive. As you know, I'm football star, and now also part-time news anchor. But I also see the impacts of our environment. And I definitely agree. As I said, I'm always for the students. I always motivate. And I always want to motivate for good causes, especially when it comes to the environment. Especially when it comes to our other fellow friends, the hogs. I feel like it's important to, see the relevance and importance of this climate. Instead of silencing these cultures and stories about climate and all these other things, it is really important to come together and promote the betterment of how we could improve our climate, and as well as topics when it comes to climate and race, because I feel like they could be intersected, especially when it comes to hogs and badgers. We tend to see differences, but we see like if we don't all come together and take care of our planet, then we'll all be affected. It doesn't matter if it just is only for hedgehogs or badgers. So I always see it's very important to break down and reimagine a system that builds upon against these inequities due to race and economic status and the environment, and try to establish a more place where we could all support one another and take care of our planet. And so I have a quick question for you, Mr. Hedge. Do you feel like any of these views presented within the text that we have read from historic or current events of which you're aware, or do you feel adequately informed? I always feel like I could always learn more, Mr. Hogg. There are always things I can improve on. It's always hard to decide what is really seen as important and what's seen as not. But when it comes to environment and topics, I definitely see it's very worth taking note of and having these conversations instead of trying to push it away, ignore it, especially in the planet that's slowly dying each year with us living on it. I feel like it's very important to, keep informing ourselves and share that knowledge to others. So that way we know the importance of better taking of our planet, being aware of any injustices, whether it's environmental or whether it's racial, and analyze how we could come together and challenge against this and build a better world where we can, thrive and survive. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Mr. Paws, and thank you so much to the Hogs for joining on this new segment on the Christmas special. We hope all you viewers have a good night and may you have a happy almost holidays and Thanksgiving. Farewell. Take care. See you soon. Goodbye.